Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming today. My name is Nagaruk Harcharak. I'm the president for the Voice of the Arctic Inupiat. I have the privilege of being here with some of my colleagues who are other elected leaders from the North Slope. You have on my right here Josiah Putkuduk. He's the newly elected mayor of the North Slope Borough. We have Lillian Stone. She is the mayor of the city of Anuktuvuk Pass. I have Doreen Levitt with me here. She is the director of natural resources for the Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope, as well as a tribal council member. They're the local regional tribe for the North Slope. And Hugh Putkuduk, a hero of mine. He is the president and CEO of Ologanak Corporation. And we have some of our other, the membership that are representative of the Voice in the audience here today. For thousands of years, the North Slope Inupiat have been stewards of the Arctic lands, waters, and wildlife. And we are inseparable from that ecosystem. Yet when Washington talks about the Arctic, our people are rarely, if ever, mentioned. Despite President Biden himself stressing the importance of listening to and working with Indigenous people on issues affecting their communities, we have been swept aside in favor of politics. The federal government continues to make decisions about our ancestral homelands, now in the name of environmental justice, with little to no regard for the voices of our people. There is no justice in that approach. I'm here this week with elected representatives of the North Slope Inupiat to advocate for consistent engagement by the federal government on all matters regarding our people and our homelands. A shameful history of little to no consultation has produced deeply flawed policy outcomes affecting the lands we have called home for thousands of years, including the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which are both singled out by the Department of Interior's unprecedented actions this fall. As a group, including our federally recognized tribe, we have issued at least 8 meeting invitations to Secretary Deb Haaland. However, each of these has been ignored or declined. This is not just a dereliction of duty, it is a violation of the rule of law. According to the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, the Secretary is obligated to honor a government-to-government relationship with our federally recognized tribes, like the one standing here with us today, the Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope. She has yet to do so. The NPRA and the 1002 area of ANWR were set aside by the federal government explicitly for their resource development potential, and with our people's leadership, the economic self-determination of the North Slope Inupiat. The Biden administration's recent decisions threaten our rights as the stewards of these lands. It is reprehensible that we were neither consulted nor given advance notice of the new policies announced in September. Instead, we found out about these policies through the news. Now the Interior has set unprecedented public comment periods for our communities to provide input into new land management proposals. The federal government is not abiding by its legal responsibility to consult with the people of the North Slope. These are the lands we and our ancestors have lived on for millennia, not just some random selection of acreage. The Inupiat villages, including Wainwright, Utqiagvik, Utqiagvik, and Nuiqsut, are the only communities located within the NPRA, and the village of Qaaqtaqavik is the only village located within ANWR. Through meetings this week with the administration, we have demanded that the North Slope Inupiat be meaningfully included at all stages of the process for any and all decisions affecting our lands and people. We have collectively traveled 25,000 miles to be here this week to make our point loud and clear to Secretary Haaland. We are also launching a new campaign to spread even more awareness among policy and decision makers. Our requests are reasonable, and our engagement has and will remain respectful. We understand that the administration is making these decisions in response to a changing climate, but our communities, our people, and our culture have the most to lose with these decisions. These actions put the survival of our communities and culture at risk, extinguishing opportunity for thousands of Indigenous people, and without our rightful place, we lose everything we have ever fought for and achieved. I'd like to now introduce Doreen Levitt, the Director of Natural Resources for the Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope. Mr. Sullivan, if you want to speak first.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And let me just begin by saying what an honor it is to be able to stand up here with my fellow Alaskans. And these are not only great Alaskans, but great Americans who have done so much for our state, for our country, veterans. I mean, this is an incredible community, and it's worth repeating. This is the trilateral community of tribal leaders, of leaders from the borough, the newly elected mayor, and of Alaska Native corporations, and the voice that brings everybody together. Now, that's the theme here, the voice. And what's really frustrating for all of us, both those of us who represent these great Alaskans, these great Americans, but even more so, you're going to hear their voices. And it's really important to hear their voices because the federal government doesn't want to hear their voices. The federal government is canceling the voices of the Alaska Native people. Of course, the irony is Secretary Holland was in Alaska at the Alaska Federation of Natives recently. She said, quote, "Your voices are the ones that must be front and center." These great Alaskans have come to Washington, D.C. 7 different times. 7 different times, including this week, requesting meetings with Secretary Holland so their voices could be heard. 7 times she said no. I have texted Secretary Holland numerous times saying, "Madam Secretary, respectfully, these are the elected people of the North Slope. Your actions in ANWR and NPRA are hugely impactful to them. They are the only Indigenous people in Alaska living in these areas. And you never consult. You never consult. And you never meet with them." 7 times. Now, she's out of town this week. 0 for 7. It's unbelievable. It's so frustrating. And here's the thing. Consultation is required. This group and us, we respectfully requested an extension to have comments on the very illegal ANWR regulations that were put out. Just an extension. That's all we requested. They never even responded. Never. I was emailing senior officials in the Biden administration yesterday saying, you need to just respond. Just show a little respect. Midnight hit last night. That was the end of the deadline for comments on the ANWR action. Never got back to us, senators, congressmen, and the Native people of the North Slope. Disrespectful. Now, let me just make one final point. This administration, every time they seem to open their mouth, they talk about the importance of environmental justice, racial equity, looking out for communities of color. Okay? I have no problem with that emphasis, but there's a giant asterisk. Unless it's an Indigenous person from Alaska, then they don't do any of that. And they don't do it. It's not debatable. They don't do it. And we are frustrated. It violates the law, but it is so disrespectful to these great Americans that I certainly am honored to have the privilege of representing. So the cancellation of their voices, which is the policy of the Biden administration, and we all know why. Because the elected officials want to have a responsible resource development policy. That's natural. And by the way, the reason they do is right there in that map that I like to show. What is that map? That map is a depiction by the American Medical Association, and we can make sure you get handouts here, that shows the life expectancy increase for Americans from 1980 to 2014. Where did life expectancy increase? It's light blue, darker blue, purple. Actually, there's a couple spots, unfortunately, in America where life expectancy decreased, mostly due to the opioid epidemic. But the area where life expectancy in America increased the most, by far, was Alaska. And it was these regions. That's the North Slope, right there. Life expectancy from 1980 to 2014 in our great state, in the homeland of these great Alaskans, increased by almost 13 years. 13 years. I held that poster board up in a hearing today, and I just asked, what's a better indicator of policy success than this? Are your constituents living longer? No one's ever been able to give me an answer. And the reason life expectancy increased, because that's when responsible resource development happened. And these communities got jobs, they got gymnasiums, they got health clinics, they got water and sewer, things that most Americans take for granted. So from our perspective, my perspective, this is a matter of life and death. Life and death. And right now, the Biden administration is purposely canceling the voices, and we're tired of it. We are tired of it. And I hope you're right about this. Give these great people a voice, because Deb Haaland certainly wants to cancel theirs.
Go ahead and then introduce her. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Doreen Levitt, and I'm here on behalf of the federally recognized regional tribe, Inupiat community of the Arctic Slope. We were developed under the Reorganization Act of 1934. As a federally recognized tribe, the federal government has the responsibility to meaningfully engage with us on actions and decisions impacting our right to exercise our tribal sovereignty. The Department of the Interior and Secretary Haaland have failed to do so on numerous occasions, but most recently regarding the September announcement impacting NPRA and ANWR. Since September's announcement, collectively among the group we're with, we have requested multiple in-person meetings with Secretary Haaland, either in Alaska or here in Washington, D.C. We have been denied or actually even ignored. There have been no public meetings in our region on ANWR. In fact, in our public meeting on NPRA we had on September 25th, I was handed the 1,400-page document, the ANWR SEIS, and it was 17 days after it was published. Our message has been clear and consistent. Decisions that impact our people cannot be made unilaterally. We will continue to use our voice loudly and respectfully to demand not just a meeting, but the administration upholds its legal responsibility of meaningful government-to-government relationships. As an Alaskan leader, it doesn't sadden me. It infuriates me that we have to travel thousands of miles, especially during Native American Heritage Month. And we just celebrated Inuit Day yesterday back home, and we missed out on those celebrations because Washington failed its duty to us, and we deserve better. Thank you.
I know Senator Murkowski has joined us, but I think I'll say a few words before I invite her up, and she can help bring home the message. And thank you, Senator Sullivan and others who have spoke. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Josiah Allahruq, recently elected as the mayor of the North Slope Borough, which is all of our jurisdiction is north of the Brooks Range. Totally encapsulates all of the NPRA. I represent the only community that is within ANWR. Before this, last month, I had to resign my seat as a state representative. And I want to highlight from the borough's perspective at least, and all of ours here, is that we've always had to deal with the federal government's pendulum swing when it came to policy decisions based on partisanship. And from our point of view, and mine specifically, having served in the State House and able to usher in a Democrat-led coalition my first term, and then flip it over into a Republican majority my second term, we know, more importantly than anyone, the independence that it takes to make sure that anything that's done in our backyard is done right and that there's a balance struck. And with what's going on today in regards to NPRA and ANWR, we know that the balance is not struck there, and that's why we have a problem, because not only do we have the trust responsibility of the indigenous people of the North Slope and the Arctic Slope to make sure that we have an economic base to further our livelihood and further our culture and traditions into the future. We have the responsibility to make sure that our subsistence way of life maintains integrity and stays intact going into the future. And we've experienced very broad and long-standing, going back 70 years at least, as to the attack on our rights to our resources. And when people think resources, you think resource development, but when we see, I'll take a page out of my uncle's book, when we see the land and we see the sea and we see the air, we see opportunity and we see resources. And that goes as far as our terrestrial game, that goes as far as our marine mammals. And the North Slope Borough is wholly involved in everything that happens in our backyard, in our front yard, and in our living room when it comes to policy that's coming down. And traditionally we always have been, going back since the formation of the borough. And the reason that we formed in 1972 was because we felt that our voice wasn't being heard. Sounds pretty familiar for what we're dealing with today, and I'm sure we'll have to continue to make sure that our voice is heard into the future. But where we felt, and this is really, I think, what people need to understand here, is that going back to that idea of the balance, is that growing up, all of us have experienced the subsistence lifestyle and understanding what it means to be Iñupiaq, what it means to carry our culture and tradition. I'm getting a little choked up because I'm raising my 4 kids right now. I've got a 9-year-old girl, a 6-year-old boy, a 2-year-old boy, and a 1-year-old girl. And I always think of the way I grew up and the responsibility that was put on my shoulders at a very young age to make sure that you carry your culture and tradition, make sure you practice your subsistence lifestyle. And subsistence lifestyle isn't something that we do once a month, once a year, or the season's here to do it. It's something that we eat, breathe, sleep, and everything, right? I mean, from the young age being taught how to identify, is that caribou looking at me? Should I be moving right now? Oh, it's not looking. Get closer, right? And all of these little life lessons that are totally focused on what it means to be an Iñupiaq person and make sure that we can continue our culture and tradition. And that's what I mean when I say subsistence, and our responsibility as the borough through our wildlife department to make sure that the unbiased science is there to back up that pendulum that swings from DC, to make sure that whatever's happening is happening on our terms, and making sure that self-determination and the local control aspect is met. And to that point, you start to look at what has been going on in the last few years, and from the borough's perspective, again, I have to keep saying that because I've only been here a month in this official capacity, but this is something that is near and dear to all of our hearts up here, as far as how we are treated by our own federal government. And so going to the decision on Anwar, where the North Slope Borough has been a cooperating agency with the Department of Interior to be recognized as that cooperating agency. But only in the last few years have we been dropped as a cooperating agency. And so when you ask yourself, are we making sure we're doing the environmental justice that we want to brag about? Are we making sure that the indigenous voices of those that are actually affected and relevant are being heard and taken into consideration? Well, when you drop the first-class home rule government as a cooperating agency from these discussions, I would say no. And so it's insulting that in the last week's worth of meetings, we go and we talk to BLM, we talk to Department of Interior, and they say, well, it's not us. You need to go talk to the White House. Okay, we'll make the call, we'll get up in the morning and we'll make sure we're at the White House. White House CEQ says, well, it's not us. You need to go talk to BLM and Department of Interior. So we go and meet with them just earlier today. And the sentiment that we get that, and this is the summation of this week's events for all of us in our delegation, is we care about indigenous voices, and we want to make sure that Native Americans and Alaska Natives have the strongest voice in this Secretary's own words at AFN saying that we are going to have a voice at the table, but then to be told that essentially we only want to hear your voice if it falls in line with DC's narrative. And that's not what self-determination and local control looks like. We will not be snuffed out. We will not be silenced. And the fight will go on as it has, referencing back 50 years ago when we had to start it with the North Slope Borough. So another step and another bump in the road, I should say. So thank you for coming, and I'll introduce our Honorable Senator Lisa Murkowski.
Mayor, thank you. It's good to call you Mayor. You hear from your Alaska delegation quite frequently on these issues. So what we may say up here today, you can probably go back to articles that you've written in the past, transcripts that you've taken in the past, and you will hear the same refrain, that it is the people of the North who matter. It is their voices that need to be heard, and they cannot be selective hearing from administration to administration. It is offensive, as a senior member of this Alaska delegation, to know how leaders in our state, strong Native leaders in our state, are being treated by this administration with indifference and a level of, I think, disrespect. Because, as the mayor has just noted, consultation is great. Hearing your voices is great as long as it reinforces what the administration wants to hear. But if there is a voice of what they consider to be dissent, it's not my problem. It's not my agency. It's not my determination. To have to come thousands of miles to our nation's capital, to literally go knocking on doors, to try to find answers to a pretty simple question as to who's the decider here, who's making the final determination on a request for an extension. Something pretty simple. I think everybody over there in the White House knows who ultimately makes that. But it is inconvenient and it is inconsistent to share that with the people who are most immediately and directly impacted. So this is hard. I have staked a reputation on saying I can work with anybody. I have to work with anybody. And so trying to find those doors, trying to find those avenues of communication. And sometimes we're successful with them. And in fairness, and I will give credit here, in fairness, we were able to do that with the Willow determination. That was important. But if the administration thinks that just making a determination, a positive determination on Willow, is all they need to do to make sure that we have taken care of Alaska, ignores and belies the other issues that we have in front of us. So whether it is the ANWR determination, whether it's the NPRA determination, or any other matter that may come before Alaska peoples, the administration needs to listen to those who are most immediately and directly impacted. So I wish that today was a more positive day where news could be shared about just an opportunity to feel heard. And even with Representative Peltola at the meeting this morning, to not be able to gain answers to pretty specific questions. So my appearance here today, and I think that of Senator Sullivan's and Representative Peltola's, is not for us to be doing the speaking, you know where we come from, but to urge you to listen to the voices of the people of the North. And to let there be no doubt, but that this delegation is absolutely united, joined at the hip united, in doing everything that we can to ensure that those voices are heard, not only today, but reflected in policy going forward. I'm honored to stand with some extraordinary Alaskans that are working to make a difference, and it may be discouraging on certain days, but when the tough gets going, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, or something like that. Anyway, that's a bad way to end a press conference.
When the whales are swimming, the whalers wake up. That's what you're doing.
That's right. That's right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you came.
Questions for this group?
Yes. That's what I was going to introduce. Anybody has any questions, one of us will answer. And thank you to Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan for being with us here today. And thank you to Congresswoman Peltola for joining us this morning for the meeting. Couldn't do it without their support. So we're happy to answer any questions.
So you had a meeting at Interior this morning, and who did you meet with, and why do you feel your voices went?
We had the opportunity to meet with the new acting Deputy Assistant Secretary, Laura Daniel Davis. And we had some very pointed questions for her that remain unanswered still. And to us, in addition to the request that we've made over the last few months to meet with the Secretary herself, have that in-person meeting, and all of those being either denied or ignored, just kind of further reiterates the fact that we are not being listened to. The public comment period for ANWR ended yesterday, and there was no public meetings on the North Slope, especially in the one community that lies within ANWR. So it's clear to us that we're not being heard in any of this.
Can you share some of the questions that you had that didn't get answers this morning?
The biggest one, and I'll ask others to join in as well, was who was making the decisions, right? We've been coming to DC for these last few months asking who are we supposed to talk to, right? We get word from BLM Alaska that the decisions are being made by DOI in Washington, D.C. We talk to DOI in Washington, D.C. They say you got to go to the White House. That's where the decisions are coming from. We met with the White House this morning. They said, I don't know why they're telling you that. This absolutely lies within DOI. So then we meet with DOI after all of that chasing, and we don't get an answer to that question. We feel like we're chasing a trail of breadcrumbs that's just leading us in this continuous circle. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just add to that, right? It's what he just answered is normal for us to have to go and do, and that's one of the hypocritical aspects of it, is that shouldn't the burden of transparency be on those who are pencil whipping these determinations? And so that's something that folks need to think about. And I'll just say that the frustration that we see with trying to make sure not only are our voices heard, you're not going to just check us as a box, but that our preferences are rolled into whatever policy is coming down. The frustration is that we don't think that our preferences will be rolled into it, and that's a lack of purity for the process, right? I mean, we look at what we just did earlier this year in regards to the reapproval of Willow. There was extension after extension. Sitting in the state legislature, I was asked from my constituency to voice their opinion on their behalf. And so there was that outswelling of speaking up on our own behalf, and it was taken into consideration, and that's why you had the reapproval, because it probably was done right the first time. And so what's coming of this, as Nugget just mentioned with Anwar's comments closing yesterday, no public meeting in any of the North Slope communities, no public meeting in Kaktovik. The story writes itself. And I'll say lastly, the frustration is that we don't think we're going to get anywhere with these discussions. We're going to keep trying, as Senator Murkowski mentioned, but we're coming to you because you're our next, as media, you're our next check and balance on our own government and how they treat us. So
I'll just jump in to your question. From the tribe, we pointedly asked, because we are a cooperating agency and they have to consult with us, and I asked, what is your internal process, Department of Interior? because I'm confused. Without the public meetings, without the, in Kaktovik, without the consultation, you're making decisions without following your own process and following the law. And we did not get an answer. I got the question back of, I don't understand what you're asking me. So that was, it's infuriating to see us having a meeting and not being able to be listened to and get no answers at all. We didn't get an answer to one question.
You have another 10 days or so, 9 days or so, I guess, on the NPRA rulemaking comment period that was extended briefly. What did Interior tell you about the opportunity for more public meetings on that? Weirdest around some of those, and the opportunity for further extension.
Right, and I actually asked that question specifically after looking down and double checking the date that today is, 8 days out or so from the decision's public comment period to end, and I followed up without necessarily getting an answer, but who, right, you say we are going to figure out what we're going to do with the November 17th deadline, and we say, okay, who's we? Because that's the runaround that we're getting on, oh, you need to go talk to this person and this person and this person and this person. And we don't get any specifics until having to pry a little bit more from Ms. Daniel Davis. And so we asked the pointed question, what is the decision already made? Is there opportunity for what we're saying today and this week to help change the direction on essentially what happened with yesterday's deadline closing? Do we have the opportunity to extend 20, 30, 40 days? And this is, from my point of view, right, where we exercise an ad valorem tax over all assessed value of our jurisdiction. It's not a production tax. It's not more oil means more borough money. That's not what this relationship is. The relationship is investment in our region, means a tax base that we can form and exercise our services to our residents for. And when you ask me, being sworn in October 10, having to change my cabinet level directors and deputy directors of my 13 departments that provide every service to all the residents in the borough that in any other part of the country is broken up between 3 or 4 different entities, right? When you go pay your light bill, you go somewhere else. Where you go pay your tax, you go pay somewhere else. Where you go pay for your fuel at the gas station, you pay all these different people. North Slope Borough does all of that under one roof. And so I'm charged with the responsibility to make sure that that goes smoothly in the fall to winter transition where we have 3, 4, 5 inches of ice on all of our water bodies right now, except the ocean. That's what my problem is right now, but it's, oh wait, on top of that, figure out what kind of economic and subsistence impact this MPRA decision has, and you got until November 17th. And when you get the unanimous consent from every elected position within the North Slope Borough, and I'm talking city government, ANCSA village corporations, regional corporations, we're talking regional tribe, village tribe, the North Slope Borough, all saying, we don't know whether we agree with this or not. Give us time to opine so that we can have a good, transparent, bulletproof process here. And we don't even get that. That's where the frustration is. So. Liz.
I do have a question.
Yep.
I was just wondering if one of you could speak to the NPRA rules and
Speaking to the MPRA rules and regs.
Sorry, what was the question?
Oh, if you could just speak to your opinion of the NPRA rules.
We've been so busy trying to figure out if we can get these things extended that like the mayor just mentioned, that we haven't had a whole lot of time to really dive into it, and that's why we're asking for that additional time to be able to do that.
Yeah, say something?
Yep.
Having been through a flying career, but Oh, my name is Hugh Putkatuk. I'm the president and CEO of Alona Corporation of the Village of Wainwright up north on the North Slope. I have lived my dream as a pilot before, and I have listened to quite a few people prior to this job I've had, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. At the same time, trying to be effective. At the same time, when you're standing before some folks like you, when you come this age at the day like this, you have to do what is right. And that was taught to us. But having been through different public comment periods, I flew for a living, and that's with the FAA, and dealing with that. And when you come to this table, departing the Department of Interior, is what's going on here? Is like, you expect to have a Bible regarding Department of Interior, how to process from here. And we haven't been able to partake in that because we're just kind of, hey man, who are you? What are you doing here? Okay, we're responsible folks. It really makes it challenging for us. You try your best to put your best foot forward, and you go back 2 steps. Seems like every time. And having said it, also when we represent our homegrown folks, the decisions that are made here really have dire consequences up north. Economic subsistence, the ability to make a living. It has been coming for a long time. Even in the early 1900s, I was born before Alaska became a state. Before, and we have grown politically. A very excellent situational awareness. I'm so thankful for that. That's why, we have trilateral committees, the ability for the tribes, for the city, and the corporation to be able to work together, region-wise. And that's why we have Voice of the Arctic Inupiat, proactive engagement, which is so strong today. And we want to have the open consultation with the Department of whoever has responsibilities for the accountability of it. And that's a challenge. We know about the chain of command. Okay, where's the chain of command with what we're talking about? I thought I'd just bring that out a little bit today. Thank you. And at the same time, we don't have our head in the iceberg. Look up in the sky, look all around, and we can make a difference. And the abilities for us, okay, what country do we live in? We're Americans, proud to be of it. And yet, at the same time, and it's not really right to be treated this way. NPRA, the idea behind that, you all know about it. I think it's for Naval Arctic Petroleum Reserve for this country. And, having dissect, special protected areas. For us too, we have to live by hunting. And if I could show you how I dress sometimes, a combination of the Western garb and a little bit of native garb, we have to take the best of both worlds. I thought I'd just make those comments. Thank you.